Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Vanoff, and today we're going to read Tehillim Dalet, or Psalm 4. I will have the Hebrew only on the screen. This is from the Sefaria.org website. If you have an English translation or translations you prefer, feel free to grab those and open those up. I have the printed King James in front of me. I am a big fan of the tone and the majesty of the King James English, especially in the Psalms, although I don't always agree with the translation. Let's begin. So the letter Dalet here is for the number 4. It's the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And we'll begin here with verse Aleph, or verse 1. Lamenatseach bin ginot mizmor leDavid. Lamnatseach is a term we've seen before. It's translated sometimes to the chief musician, Lamnatseach, but in the Greek has the telos, to the end. And I wonder if this might be a term setting the tone of the contemplation or the tone of the meditation for the person who is singing or reading or even hearing this. It's like, where is their mind focused? And so I think that Lamnatseach can mean for looking at the big picture, looking towards the horizon of the future that God has in store for his people. Then it says, bin ginot. Bin ginot is a music term. We don't know exactly what it means. Mizmor leDavid. Mizmor leDavid. Mizmor is a term that is translated into Greek as psalmos, where we get our word psalm, P-S-A-L-M, is from the Greek word. But mizmor is the term, a psalm of David, or a mizmor of David. Verse bet. Bekar'i aneni. Elohei tzidki. Batzar hirchavtali. Chaneni ushma tfilati. So back to the beginning. Bekar'i. So this is in Hebrew what we call an infinitive construct. Be is in. Kar'i is a construct of the infinitive kara, to call out, with the suffix, the hirik yod, I, mine, in my calling out, bekar'i. And so in my calling out can be translated when I call. When I call. But I like in my calling out. When I call distances us a little bit. Like there's times where I won't call, times where I will. That's not really the sense here as so much when as in my calling out. In other words, the psalmist is presently calling out, not talking about a time where he or she may or may not, but it's certainly presently in my calling out. Bekar'i aneni. Aneni means answer me. And the imperative is to the Lord. It's a second person masculine singular. And then the ni is me, the object, aneni. So both the hirik yods here, the little dot with the under a letter with the yod, means me. Bekar'i, in my calling out. Aneni, answer me. Elohei tzidki. You see, we have tzedek plus the hirik yod. The hirik is that little dot under the kuf. My tzedek, my righteousness. Bekar'i aneni Elohei tzidki. O God of my righteousness. This is such an important theological point. Elohei tzidki. What does it mean, God of my righteousness? It means that the tzedek that the worshiper has discerned, The righteousness that the worshiper has identified and has valued is not their own invention, not their own creation, not their own best guess. It's rather God's righteousness. So Elohei Tzidki, the God of my righteousness, means the God of the gifts that I have received from him, from whom I have discerned by his wisdom the treasures of his kingdom. So Bekar'i aneni, in my crying out, answer me, Elohei Tzidki. This means the God from whom I've already received what is good. And I'm calling out again, because we never get to the point where we never need anything from God. No, not at all. We're always dependent on his grace, his love, his mercy, and we know he is there for us. Bekar'i aneni Elohei tzidki, batzar hirchavta li. Hear that other li. Batzar, that means in the times of straits, in the narrow times, in times of pressure, in times of straits, in the tsar. Tsar literally comes from the idea of narrow. In narrow times or being squeezed. Hirchavta li, you have widened me. So hirchavta, you have made wide, or you have broadened me. So this is a reference now to the past. So even though in the present I'm crying out, answer me, Elohei Tzidki, I'm saying in the past, Batzar hirchavta li, you have widened me in times of difficulty and trials. And so he is the same yesterday and today. I'm seeking him for today, for help. Chaneni. That's just like aneni is answer me. Chaneni is show me grace. Be gracious to me. So you can see aneni and chaneni sound a lot alike. The only difference is the initial letter and some vowel points. But answer me, be gracious to me. And what do we know? We know that righteousness, we know that grace are part of God's character. So when he behaves, when we call on him according to what we know his character to be, he behaves according to us, according to his character. Answer me, and then chaneni, be gracious to me. Shema tefilati. Now this is so interesting because Shema, it's the same Shema that we are to hear, the greatest commandment in Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, Shema Yisrael. Here we are saying the Shema to Adonai. Shema, hear, O Lord. Shema tefilati, hear my tefillah. So count the E's. We have Bekar'i, Aneni, Tzidki, Li, Chaneni, and Tfilati. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times in verse Bet of Psalm 4 do we have what we call the first person singular. That's me. First person plural would be we, but first person singular is me or I as the suffix. Hear my tefillah. So if here we learn that tefillah has a voice to it. It corresponds to the bekar'i, to calling out. Now it could be quiet. It doesn't mean it has to be loud, but a tefillah is a voice of a human unto Adonai's ears. And here it says, Shema tefillati, hear my tefillah. Now we're going to learn a little bit about what is this tefillah. Verse Gimel, B'nai Ish, that means sons of men. B'nai Ish, adme kvodi lechlima. For how long, kvodi, my glory, lechlima, to shame. Why my glory for shame? And then it says, the next line, te'ehavun rik. You have loved rik, emptiness or vanity. You have loved emptiness. And actually, I should correct myself. It's not really you have loved, because it's in the imperfect. Te, with the tav at first. Te'ehavun. You would love. You would go on loving, and in the future you would love. So it could be like this imperfective, and maybe even what we call like a non-indicative of a more like a possibility. Would you go on loving emptiness? And then we have a parallel. Tevakshu kazav. Would you go on seeking kazav, which is a lie, falsity? Would you go on loving vanity or emptiness? Would you go on seeking a lie? Selah. So Selah is this poetic word of song or pause and meditation. So verse Gimel, B'nai ish, adme kvodi leklima, te'ehavun rik, tevakshu kazav, Selah. So the cry here of the worshiper is that the other people, they do not discern kvodi, my glory, which is just as the worshipper's kvod is the same as his tzedek that we saw in the prior verse, a value that comes from God, a value of the treasures of God's kingdom that humans are to identify and treasure and hold to and to value and protect and to even exemplify with his grace. But here, it's not being discerned by the B'nai Ish. They are not discerning the values of God's kingdom. They are not discerning what is kavod. Rather, they are treating it as klima, as shame. And would you go on loving y'all? The verb here, te'ehavun and tevakshu, are both second person plural, speaking to the B'nai Ish. Would you go on loving emptiness? Would you go on seeking a lie? Well, normally in biblical instruction, according to the Torah, what is the object of our ahav, aleph, hey, bet, love? What is the object of our seeking? Bet, kuf, shin. We are to love and seek Adonai. We are to love and seek truth. We are to love and seek the things of his kingdom. Not vanity, not a lie. We are to seek to discern, like Yeshua instructs us, to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Well, here the B'nai Ish are on the wrong path. And the psalmist in his tefillah is crying out, saying, would you continue to love emptiness? This reminds me of Psalm 55. Why do you labor for what does not satisfy? Why do you spend your money on that which is not good? Same thing here. Would you love emptiness? Would you seek a lie? So we have the need for humans to have a regenerated heart so that we can discern and seek God's kingdom. Verse Dalet. Te'ud'u ki hifla Adonai chasid lo. Adonai yishma bekar'i elav. So ud'u, the u is just and. The u is know, y'all know. So it's still referring to the B'nai Ish from the prior verse. Know. Learn this, in other words. Know for sure. Hold as a foundational presupposition. Take this to the bank. That's what de'u means. Ki hifla Adonai chasid lo. That the Lord sets apart the chassid to himself. Chassid is a word meaning pious, the pious one, the saint. The Chassid is the one who Yeshua talks about in Matthew 5, for example, the one who is poor for the Spirit, or towards the Spirit. That is, they put heavenly reality, the truth of God's kingdom, above pursuits in the world. And so that's the Chassid, that's the person who is close to God's heart. And it says, Ki hifla Adonai Chassid lo. The Lord has set him apart to himself. This means that the Lord values the Chassid. This is the kind of person whom the Lord desires. Remember what Yeshua tells the Samaritan woman. The Father seeks those who worship him in spirit and in truth. Those are the true Hasidim. The Hasidim are those who worship the Father in spirit and truth. And those he has hifla lo. He has set them apart to himself. Isn't that wonderful? They're his special treasure. And then it continues, Adonai Yishma bekar'i elav. The Lord Yishma, he will hear bekar'i elav, in my crying out to him. You see, bekar'i, that's our very first word from the psalm. Bekar'i, in my crying out. Here it says, Yishma bekar'i elav. So the tefillah is the crying out. So when we say, Shema tefillati, O Adonai, hear my tefillah, here the psalmist is telling the Bnei Ish, Yishma bekar'i elav, Adonai will hear when I pray. He will hear my tefillah. Why? Because the person, the Hasid, who loves him, has identified his treasures and is confident in his relationship with the Almighty. He is not seeking a lie. He is not seeking or loving emptiness. Rather, he delights in the things of the Lord. Verse 5, or Hey, Rigzu ve'al techeta'u. Rigzu ve'al techeta'u. Imru bilvavchem al mishkavchem ve'domu selah. So here we have more what we call imperative, second person plural imperatives, just like we saw with the u, like no. Here we have rigzu ve'al techeta'u. So rigzu in the King James says stand in awe, ve'al techeta'u, and do not sin. And y'all stand in awe and do not sin. But this is cited in Ephesians 4. Paul cites this passage. Be angry and sin not. But rigzu can mean be stirred up. So it's okay to be, you can be stirred up, right? Your heart rate goes up, you're stirred up, you're feeling upset, or even some indignation about some injustice in the world. But it says, so there's nothing wrong with feeling strong emotion, but that's what rigzu is. Go ahead and feel the strong emotion, va'al techeta'u, but do not sin. And then it continues. It doesn't just leave it there. Imru bilvavchem al mishkavchem. Imru. So rigzu, feel that emotion, but then imru bilvavchem, speak in your hearts. So don't sin. In other words, don't react. Rather, speak in your own hearts, on your beds, vidomu, and be silent or be still, selah. In modern psychological terms, I think what the psalmist is describing here is a kind of what they would call as a self-regulation of emotion. But it's not just psychological. This is true spiritual self-regulation. that the saint, the chassid, is going to feel strongly about things in the world, but must not sin. That's not a license to sin. It's not a license to damage. It's not a license to lash out. Rather, imru bilvavchem, speak in your hearts. That means we take it to the Lord in quiet. Al mishkavchem v'domu. It means we go to the Lord. Like Yeshua says, we close the door and we pray to our Father who is in secret, and He knows what we need before we even ask. But we must learn to be still. We must learn to be still and to be quiet, to come into His presence, to worship Him, and to bring our tefillah, and to wait on Him. Verse Vav, continuing with the imperatives, zivhu. Zivhu, that means sacrifice. Zivchei tzedek, sacrifices of tzedek, of righteousness. That means worship God the way that God has ordained to be worshipped. Worship God appropriately. Come to God on the terms that God has revealed. God has revealed Himself in His Word. Remember how the sons of Aaron, the first and second born sons of Aharon, in the book of Leviticus, what did they do? Nadav and Avihu, they presumed to worship God. They brought what it says, strange fire. They presumed to worship God according to their dictates of their own invention and their own innovation. And they were instantly killed. It says, Zivchu zivchei tzedek. This is the same tzedek that is revealed. That means approach God according to who He's informed us that who He is. Uvidhu el Adonai, and trust in the Lord. Trust in Him. That means He is trustworthy, of course. We know that. Bidhu el Adonai. Now, if we just go back and look at the verbs that were in the plural, in the imperative, de'u, know that the Lord has set apart the chassid for Himself. Verse 5, rigzu, so be stirred up. Va'al techeta'u, but do not sin. Imru, speak in your hearts. Domu, be still. Y'all be still. Zivhu, sacrifice. It's an act of worship. Worship in spirit and truth. And bidhu, trust in Him. These all go together. None of these bump any of these others. All these imperatives are good and proper and true. Let's continue verse Zayin. Rabim omrim mi yar'enu tov. Nesa aleinu or panecha Adonai. So the first half, Rabim omrim, many people. Rabim, it just means crowds. Many people, omrim, are saying, many people are saying, mi yar'enu tov. Who will show unto us tov? Who will make clear to us tov? What does this mean? It means that humans do not know how to discern good and evil because we get persuaded so easily. We'll hear, just like Eve and the serpent. Next thing you know, she's looking at that tree saying it's good. When we know, the reader attentively paying attention, we know that it's not good. But we humans can be persuaded. And so we have someone saying this is good. We'll have someone else saying this is good. In Isaiah 5, it says, woe to those who call good evil and evil good. So the ancient prophets and the ancient saints knew so well how this world has different uses of words that twist and distort reality. And we know from the prophet Jeremiah, who tells us plainly that the human heart is twisted and deceitful above all. So, mi yar'enu tov, who will show us tov? This is like saying, what is really good? What's the real good? What is good, capital G? From the creation account in Bereshit, we know that what Adonai calls tov is tov. What Adonai calls tov corresponds to the reality of what he has made. So when Adonai created something and called it tov, it is forever tov. And then it says, Nesa aleinu or panecha, Adonai. Lift up over us, or panecha, the light of your presence, or the light of your face, Adonai. So the psalmist is crying out, reveal to us, lift up for us, make clear for us the light of your presence, or panecha. Why? Because this is how we discern. By his light we see light. By his revelation, by his granting of wisdom, by his granting us discernment, we can see what is tov in his eyes. Not what I think is tov, but what he calls tov. So many people in the world are saying, who will show us tov? What's the response? And the psalmist, he cries out to the Lord, Nesa aleinu, lift up over us, or panecha Adonai, the light of your presence, the light of your face, O Adonai. That means reveal to us what is good. Show us by your light. Show us what is good. The next verse is Chet, or 8. Natata simcha velibi. You have given simcha velibi. You have given joy in my heart. Me'et deganam v'tirosham rabu. More than their multiplication of grain and wine. Deganam u'tirosham, their grain and their wine. So this is a simcha that does not come from worldly wealth. Now, there's nothing wrong with when there's an increase in grain and wine, when there's increase of good things, good material things that many people benefit from. That is good. That's not bad. But the point here, the psalmist is saying, Natata simcha v'libi me'et, meaning more than. That means the joy that, O Adonai, that you have set, that you have given, natata, into my heart, is greater than. And we know that this is just like with faith, like we learn in 1 Peter, that the faith is more precious than gold and silver. So the value systems of the kingdom of heaven is not only more real and is for us, we're designed to attune to him, is better than material goods, than the multiplication of material goods. We see that throughout the Psalms and the prophets. And then finally, verse 10. Beshalom yachtav eshkeva ve'ishan, ki ata Adonai levadad, lavetach toshiveni. Beshalom, in peace. Beshalom, in shalom. Yachdav means both. But both what? Well, we have two verbs, eshkeva ve'ishan. I will lie down and I will sleep. So in shalom, I will both lie down and I will sleep. Ki ata Adonai, because you are Adonai, levad. Levadad, alone are Adonai. Lavetach toshiveni. Lavetach is safety. Lavetach, for safety, in safety, or securely. Toshiveni, you have caused me to dwell or to reside. This is where we get that word toshav, if you've, the Gerevit toshav, if you've heard of that. But this is from yashav, to sit or to dwell, in the hifil, though. Toshiveni, you have caused me to dwell, lavetach, securely. So where does security come from in this world? Does it come from material wealth? No. Yeshua says, what's a man who gains the whole world going to do if he loses his soul? What shall he give in exchange for his soul? No. Security does not come from worldly wealth. Security comes from discerning and valuing and holding precious the treasures of the kingdom of heaven. That's where true shalom is. That is the person who can lie down and sleep in shalom. Why? Because they have shalom with God. Because they love Yeshua. And they know him. They hear his voice. And they worship him. And toshiveni, it says, lavetach toshiveni, you have caused me to lie down securely. That means just as much as you natata simcha v'libi, you have set joy in my heart. You have caused me to dwell in safety. Those go together, don't they? Because the people who don't know what good is, those are people in darkness. But when natata simcha, he has given joy in my heart, that's from him. That's not joy off of some artificial thing in this world or some transitory kind of response to something in the world. No, this is simcha from the Holy One. And the betach, the security that he causes his people to reside in, it comes from the same place. It comes from him. So he gives his people discernment. Now, we can think back to Psalm 1, where it says, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halak, etc. He doesn't walk, he doesn't stand, he doesn't sit in these places, but rather he meditates on the Torah. Well, that's where safety is. It doesn't mean that I can go wherever I want and be safe. No, because Ashrei ha'ish, blessed is the man who does not walk in those ways of the world, who does not do all those things that we see that the psalmist of Psalm 1 is saying he avoids. The blessedness of the man who avoids those things. He doesn't go into those places. Now, if he happens upon something, like if he walks in Psalm 23 in the valley of the shadow of death, it says he will not fear evil, ki ata imadi, because you are with me, but he doesn't go out seeking to be in dangerous places, just to tempt. No, it says, lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil. So this betach, this security, is a toshiveni, that he causes us to dwell in, is where we reside. We stay in safety. We stay in security because we are in relationship with him, and he is our light. Okay, let's go back and we'll just read through the psalm as a whole. This is Tehillim Dalet. La menatzeach bin ginot mizmor leDavid. Bekar'i aneni Elohei tzidki. Batzar hirchavta li. Haneni ushema tefilati. Bnei ish adme kvodi leklima. Te'ehavun rik. Tevakshu chazav. Selah. Ud'u ki hifla Adonai chasid lo. Adonai yishma bekar'i elav. Rigzu ve'al techeta'u. אמרו בלבבכם על משכבכם ודומו סלע. זבחו זבחי צדק וביטחו אל אדוני. רבים אומרים מי יראנו טוב? נשא עלינו אור פניך אדוני. נתת שמחה וליבי, מאת דגנם ותירושם ורבו. בשלום יחדיו אשכבה ואישן, כי אתה אדוני לבדד. לבטח תושיבני. שלום.